So as societies become more egalitarian, so their equality of opportunity legislation is more widespread and arguably more effective. And so that would be in countries like Australia, but more particularly in countries like the Scandinavian countries, because they've taken it farther than anywhere else. Fewer women go into the STEM fields. Fewer, not more. And so if you rank order countries by how free women are, there's a negative relationship with how probable it is that they'll go into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. Now, and the evidence for that is very, very strong, by the way. This isn't just a few casual studies. These are large-scale international studies with tens of thousands of participants, replicated multiple times by researchers who did not expect to find that, nor want it. So it's reliable. Okay, so why? Well, there's a bunch of different theories. One is that the average IQ of men and women is the same, and that's quite clear. But the male curve is flatter than the female curve, and that's the, what do they call that? The enhanced male variability hypothesis, which has almost now become impossible to publish on because it's politically incorrect. And what it suggests is that there are more men at the very upper end of the intelligence distribution and more men at the very lower end. And that explains some things, like why there are far more boys, for example, who have learning disabilities than there are girls. And there's some evidence that men are more neurologically vulnerable than women because they're more specialized neurologically. And the advantage to that is this enhanced variability, but the disadvantage is the specialization makes them less robust and resilient neurologically. Be that as it may. That's one possibility. And I think there's a fair bit of evidence for that. And it's often the case that differences at the extreme, even if there aren't differences in the middle, differences at the extreme actually make a big difference. You know, because like, let's say you're going to be an engineer. Maybe one person in 100 is an engineer. And you have to be really interested in gadgets to be an engineer. You know, you have to be more interested than 99 out of 100 people to be an engineer. And there's not that many people that are like that. And most of them happen to be men. Now, people have criticized the male variability hypothesis because they've looked at the performance of girls in mathematics in junior high school. And it turns out that girls do pretty much as well as boys do in mathematics in high school, in junior high, at the upper end. And so those would be the people you'd expect to go into the STEM fields, right? Because they have the, what would you call it? They have the intellectual ability for it. But what you see is that the women who have high mathematical ability also tend to have high verbal ability. Whereas the men that have high mathematical ability tend to have less high verbal ability. And so one of the things that implies is that the women who have high mathematical ability have more vocational choice. And so they're statistically less likely to go into the STEM fields. So that's kind of an interesting, no one expected that, so that's kind of an interesting observation. And then there's another observation too that's also extraordinarily germane. There's a variety of ways of looking at the psychological differences and similarities between men and women. And the first thing that you might want to know is that men and women are more similar than they are different on all the personality dimensions. So the overlap is quite strong. The biggest differences are, there's 5 personality dimensions. I mentioned them: extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness. The biggest differences are in neuroticism. Women are higher in negative emotion, and that kicks in at puberty, because it's not the case for boys and girls.